As Israel continues its war on Gaza, Europe is trying to broker a ceasefire. But can Europe deliver without the US? Why has the international community been slow to act? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome, I'm David Foster. The war on Gaza continues to take its toll. Israeli forces killed 7 members of a Palestinian family in a strike on their home, following another shelling which killed 3 children and their mother. International pressure on Israel still very limited, but compared to last week, some efforts are underway. A delegation of the European Union met the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. The delegation appealed for an end to both Israel's shelling of Gaza and Palestinian rocket attacks on Israel. In private, Mubarak also had a meeting with the French President Nicolas Sarkozy. Now, Sarkozy will be shuttling across the Middle East in the next couple of days, travelling to Jerusalem, Ramallah and Syria. He speaks out for a ceasefire, but clearly a ceasefire under Israel's terms and conditions. Well, for many Arabs, the European position does not take into account the disproportionate balance of power between Israelis and Palestinians. The Emir of Qatar said Israel's invasion of Gaza amounted to a war crime and renewed calls for an emergency summit of Arab countries.
To Israel's leaders, I say, killing the innocent civilians and the military arrogance will not bring security to you or to us. It will lead to catastrophic results. Those who planned this war, did they ever think of the angry Arab and Palestinian generations who are growing up in the middle of such pictures? Any ceasefire should also end the blockade and open all the crossings. Those who call for a mutual ceasefire are putting the criminal and the victim on an equal footing and are retroactively justifying the aggression and the blockade.
The United Nations Security Council so far failed to call for an immediate ceasefire by Israel. The Security Council met again on Saturday. Its only Arab member, Libya, issued a draft statement on the conflict. It expressed serious concerns about Israel's ground offensive. Insiders say the United States is refusing to sign any statement unless it declares that Hamas is a terrorist organization that seized power in Gaza. The US envoy to the United Nations claims Hamas will ignore any statement. He says it's pointless for the UN to even issue one. Well, joining us today, guests first of all from Tel Aviv, Menachem Klein, former advisor to former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, currently the Israeli Defense Minister. And Mr. Klein is also a Geneva Initiative signatory. We'll explore that in a little bit of time. From Beirut, Alistair Crook, former European Union diplomat and founder of Conflicts Forum. Mr. Klein, Mr. Crook, let me ask you first of all for a one-word answer on this. We'll get into more detail in just a moment. Starting with you, Mr. Klein, can Israel bombard Hamas into an agreement that suits it, Israel? Yes or no?
No.
Mr. Crook?
No.
No. OK, so unanimous on that one. Alistair Crook, that said, what pressure can the international community put on Israel for a ceasefire?
Well, I think there's a lot of pressure that they can put, but I don't think there's any sign or any likelihood that they're going to put any pressure on Israel. There may be some pressure to alleviate the humanitarian situation in Gaza, but I think the reasons that they will not put any pressure on Israel is because the European Union particularly is divided on its policy and on its tactics. I think the UN, as you just indicated, is really paralyzed. And I think that equally in the Arab world there is a wider conflict, a conflict, if you like, between some states like Egypt and Saudi Arabia versus the states allied with Iran. So it's a complex situation.
You said there is a lot of pressure that could be applied. What for example?
Well, I think the European Union has just announced that they'll go ahead with a new association agreement with Israel that would give it a number of trade and other benefits. It would allow Israeli ministers to join in with European ministers in certain meetings. And despite the pressures from indeed the Palestinian president and prime minister, not to allow this to go ahead. The European Union's announced a little while ago that they were going ahead with it, despite all the problems that were taking place in terms of growth of settlements and other breaches of, if you like, the Annapolis Agreement.
Menachem Klein, what sort of pressure would Israel most fear?
First, delegitimation of the Israeli operation. And second, a proposal of a ceasefire composed both by the EU or separately by different European countries and some Arab and states with Turkey. The combination of the two can force Israel to stop the invasion into the streets of Gaza City.
And if that were to be the case, why would Israel be scared when in the past it's largely ignored pressure from the international community when it suits it?
International pressure can have different kinds, different sources. I do not expect the EU to cut off all its relationship with Israel or downgrade its relations. But I do expect, and I do think that the envoys of the different European countries work now in the region to form up a proposal for Israel, agreed by Hamas and Egypt and Turkey, to stop the fighting, and then afterwards to establish some kind of an arrangement that will arrange the relationship between Hamas, Gaza Strip, and the State of Israel, some inspection of the border crossing, and a complete ceasefire on the cost of speaking indirectly to Hamas, legitimizing Hamas, and letting off the blockade. It is actually the declaration of the failure of the blockade.
OK, let's bring in from Cairo Ambassador Abdullah Al-Ashal, former Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs in Egypt. Thank you for joining us. I want to get around to the Arab reaction to what's happening in Gaza. We've talked about the sort of pressure that can be applied to Israel, but would all attempts appear doomed to failure because Arab governments at the moment appear unwilling to do anything concrete?
Yeah, unfortunately, the Arab states are divided, and the situation is very confused. And I can say that they are divided into two camps. The first camp is tacitly supporting Israel, and the other one is trying to find a solution for the problem because of the increasing losses and casualties in Gaza and the atrocities which are committed by Israel in Gaza as well. So the streets are boiling, and these streets are pushing the governments to do something, but they feel that they are unable to do. But in fact, some of them are tacitly complicit with Israel.
Which ones? Let me apologize at the moment for interrupting you, Mr. Ambassador, but can you tell me which governments you feel are complicit with Israel?
Yes, I think I don't want to accuse anyone, of course, because
you've made the statement that some Arab governments are complicit in what Israel is doing. Which governments?
Yeah, they are nearly complicit. They are not exactly complicit because we don't have evidences. We have some some attitudes which can be counted as some sort of complicit. For example, if they are silent from doing anything, if they are excusing themselves from doing some actions, if they can do and they don't want to do, if they have many cards and they don't want to use them, if they are excusing themselves for by some uncertain excuses. For example, Egypt is not complicit, but in fact, Egypt can do many things. And Egypt now says that I'm accused by everybody of complicity, but in fact, I'm unable to do anything.
Well, so let me bring in Alistair Crook at this point. Since the ambassador's perhaps unable for certain reasons to name governments, would you care to do so?
Yes. Egypt and Saudi Arabia, certainly in the Arab League, have recently been, I think, attempting to try and corner Hamas in recent moves in the Arab League, to have it named as the movement, the group that was hindering Palestinian unity, and to try and bring some form of Arab League sanctions or isolation to bear on Hamas in order to force it to do the Arab League will on this, which is essentially to restore the authority of their protege, Abu Mazen.
So, Mr. Klein, Menachem Klein from Tel Aviv, if Arabs won't do anything to protect other Arabs, Palestinians in this case, Israel must think it can act almost with impunity and therefore believe it has a license to carry on with what it's doing.
Actually, in the Israeli cabinet, there are voices calling to go on for a complete operation to reoccupy for a short while Gaza Strip and take a comprehensive action against Hamas regime, not to stop. Others keep the goals open-ended. Now, much depends in the international community and the pressure that's coming from the popular level, from the people on the streets, those who protest in the Arab countries, Asia and Europe, and put the pressure on the leaders that show some interest, or at least I can say the Egyptian attitude was interpreted by the Israelis as supporting the Israeli action. The pressure coming on the government from the popular level and on Israel from abroad can help and stop the Israelis before they continue.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the insight you've given us so far. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at what could possibly happen as the war in Gaza goes on, and also take a look at the role of the United States. Stay with us, if you will, on Inside Story.